President Biden has confirmed that the second set of classified documents found by his lawyers were in the garage of his house in Wilmington, Delaware. Answering questions after a speech on the US economy, Mr. Biden said he took classified materials seriously and was cooperating fully with the Justice Department.
As I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage, okay? So it's not like you're sitting out in the street. But at any rate, yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified materials seriously. I also said we're cooperating fully and completely with the Justice Department's review. As part of that process, my lawyers reviewed other places where documents from my time as vice president were stored, and they finished the review last night. They discovered a small number of documents of classified markings in storage areas and file cabinets in my home and my personal library. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn Center. The Department of Justice was immediately, as was done, the Department of Justice was immediately notified, and the lawyers arranged for the Department of Justice to take possession of the document.
Joe Biden speaking a short time ago. Our Washington correspondent Gary O'Donoghue is with us. Gary, just put this into context for us. Just remind us of the background to this whole argument about classified documents.
Well, I think the first thing to say, this is hugely embarrassing for President Biden. Not only were this batch of documents found in the think tank in Washington back in November, and we didn't find out about that, incidentally, until this week. So it took them 2 months to tell anyone. But now there's this second batch that turns up in his garage next to his fancy 1960s sports car with the half-open cans of WD-40, and apparently it's okay because the garage is locked. Now, he's facing accusations of hypocrisy because, of course, he called Donald Trump irresponsible for not giving back classified documents as he should have done when he left the White House. And he's also facing an investigation from the Justice Department who are looking into this. So there's a real problem here, a real political problem for Joe Biden, not least the accusations of hypocrisy, but also what was in these documents, how classified were they, what risks have been placed on national security as a result, because they've been floating around in these various places since 2019 at least, when the first batch was found, and possibly even earlier.
And just briefly, Gary, I mean, you obviously lots of political comparisons with what's going on with Donald Trump, but the scale is very different. The context is very different.
Well, at the moment, the scale is different. At the moment, the context is a bit different. I mean, Joe Biden has said he's cooperated, his lawyers have cooperated straight away, that they handed this stuff straight over to the National Archives when they found it, and that the Justice Department was informed. Now, many of those things didn't happen in the case of Donald Trump. His lawyers obfuscated, they handed some over, they didn't then hand over others, they were forced with a subpoena, and then they ended up with a search warrant which searched Mar-a-Lago last August, and Donald Trump is under criminal investigation for holding on to those papers, as well as obstruction in getting hold of them. So there are differences, of course, but the bottom line is that this is classified material that was being kept hold of by a private citizen, as Joe Biden was, after he stopped being vice president, and he shouldn't have done it. Cooperation, you don't get that many points for saying, well, I'm cooperating. You shouldn't have done it in the first place. And
Gary, these questions were raised after a speech by Joe Biden on the economy. He talked about inflation going in the right direction. What more did he say?
Well, I mean, this is him trying to sort of pep up the economy. I mean, he's been doing that, I think, since the Inflation Recovery Act, which he's very, very proud of. And this is part of the ongoing sort of campaign, if you like, to prove that things can still get done. So you saw him the other day, for example, at a sort of bridge construction effort down in Kentucky with the Republican leader in the Senate, the minority leader there. I think you're going to see more of those things to try and keep the economy front and centre while the inflation starts to get tackled in the normal way through interest rates.
OK, Gary O'Donoghue in Washington, thank you very much indeed.